next to Doc?
Yeah, I'm right here. So, Doc, introducing Dr. Buonocore, who's become a friend as well as a student here up at Bluebell. And tell everybody how we met. Like, so you would come to me, and most of the time when a student your age, not saying you're old, right?
No.
A little older than me.
Yeah.
But comes to you and I was saying, like, how did you find me? And you said social media.
Yes.
I was like, what the hell? Right? That's not what I was thinking. And so tell everybody, so you're a neurosurgeon.
Yes, I'm a neurosurgeon practicing in
Philadelphia.
It used to be in Philadelphia, and now New Jersey.
For sure, the smartest guy at this table. So I want to talk a little bit about how you learn, okay? Because I've passed them on to Jackson, so many gold nuggets from working with you, right? And first of all, talk to me, tell everybody why you found the stuff we put out on social media interesting and why you came to see us.
Well, first of all, between Instagram and the podcast, I found it very relatable. Very relatable. It wasn't overly technical. It was something that I said, oh, that makes sense. That's practical. To me, it came more, instead of numbers, it was body mechanics. If you swing this way, your body reacts that way. And being a physician, I could relate and understand to that. And my undergrad was engineering, so that also made a lot of sense too.
Double whammy dealing with it.
So I could understand when you put too many numbers and you get lost. But it's sort of like when you do an experiment and you have it on paper and then you do it, there's two different things. And the way you explained it was more body motion and mechanics rather than throwing out TrackMan numbers and swing angles and things of that nature, where the person who is the average golfer can't appreciate that, doesn't understand that. That's basically getting too far in the weeds.
And so at some point you're going to meet Colby. I'll bring him up here, right? But he helped me a lot understanding how the body moves. I'd always taught pivot,
right?
But a lot of what he taught me was about how to teach people new ways to move and new movement patterns.
Yes.
And one of the first things I bounced off of you, I think during our first lesson, was my old mentor Hank had told me once. He did this experiment. I don't know if I told you that, but he had two brothers. They owned a car dealership. One had a family, couldn't ever practice, and one was single and liked to play, practice all the time, and could go hit. He went and hit balls every day. The brother who had the family did stuff without a ball, without a club, and a mirror, and then played as once a week. And this was a very unscientific experiment. But Hank, at the end of the year, the one who couldn't go hit balls every day, did the stuff in the mirrors, handicap dropped by like 30% more than the other.
Well, then again, body movements. And then the biggest thing is he's actually seeing what he's doing. So you're hitting a ball and you may think you're doing it, but when you're in the mirror, you can actually see what you're doing.
So talk about that. You told me the whole thing about the cerebellum and about how on the premise that when you go full speed, so anybody out there that's listening to us or watching us, when you go full speed with a club, with a ball, you basically do what you've always done.
Right. You're actually, okay. If I threw a ball to you, you would just go like this and grab it. Mm-hmm. No particular way. You would just react to it. Mm-hmm. But if I were to put it in slow motion, you would gradually bring it in a right angle and catch it appropriately. So slow motion, you are able to dictate your movements. With the other one, it's just basically your cerebellum, which is your balance. I've always said that athletes probably have the biggest cerebellum. They have the best coordination. So that's your coordination center, and that's all you're relying on. But by doing something slow, you're taking your forebrain and your cerebral hemispheres and then dictating into the cerebellum, and then the cerebellum is just smoothing out and coordinating it. So I see people that have traumatic injuries to their cerebellum, and that's where the term spasticity comes. And they can't move, and they have rigidity and everything because they don't have those coordination fibers. Even though the intent is there, they don't have it. So what you can do is you have to use the whole brain. So by doing slow motion, you're trying to dictate it, and then the cerebellum is just smoothing it out. It's taking out the wrinkles.
So the best, so
And then it gets to the point where you're just reacting.
right, which is what happens when you go full speed. Like if a tour player on the tee, first tee of a major, and he goes full speed, his body's going to react. He's going to do whatever it is in there that he knows how to do.
When he's hitting balls on the tee, he does not want to think. He just wants to react. Now he just wants to put it in autopilot.
So how do we train people? What are the best ways to help people get to where when they go full speed and react, it's the new shit?
Okay. I had a professor that, and then this even applied in neurosurgery. Neurosurgery has two components. It has the intellectual component. You have to understand the brain, and it has the actual coordination. You have to be able to operate. I knew a couple of guys that after 4 years got kicked out because they just didn't have hands. So you have to be coordinated.
That would be an operation I kind of would like you to have good hands.
Right. So my
Just
point,
say it. That and a vasectomy, the two
yeah,
things
exactly. So the point being is you need to be coordinated, but you need to teach it. And he used to say, the mother of all learning is repetition, both mentally and intellectually, but also physically. So it takes like 10 years to be a neurosurgeon, and you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And it gets to the point, I wish I could golf like I operate. I'm in the OR. I used to play sports. I was a baseball and hockey player and stopped at high school. That's the only time where I feel like I'm back doing sports, because my hands and everything just move. But I don't think about this. I think about this, what I need to get accomplished, but my hands just react. So a golfer needs to think about what he does in practice, but when he comes to golfing, he needs to react, but he has to get to that level. And the way you get to it is repetition and body movements and slow motion, and then going faster.
So, all right, so let's talk. I want to talk about the practice swing, because that was new today.
Yes.
And you know, I know there's people that don't do it and all that, but I tell people I ask people a lot. You've taken enough lessons from me. I ask them to rehearse it, right, and to do it slow. Why does is that good, and why does a practice swing help somebody get better and learn?
So from a neurophysiologic view, what you're doing is you're activating the cells in the brain called neurons. And the neurons talk to other neurons through synapses. And so when you're doing it slow motion, you're saying it very slowly, loudly, and it's getting there. And the next time you do it, they've already heard it, and then they can do it. So analogous to, say you lived in the Northeast and your driveway had snow. You plowed it deliberately straight down, and then right behind you, your relative came out, whether it be your son or your wife, drove straight down the road right after. If you wait 6 hours later, you can't do that. So you slowly do the first track plowing. The second time you go through, you can go really quickly and easily. So same thing with the highway of the brain, to be analogous. The neurons will make the initial one, they fire this electrical stimulus, they're still reacting, and then the second one comes in much easier, much quicker. And they actually, we've known for a fact, so you have a neuron and another neuron, and in the middle is the highway, which is your synapses. And that's actually called, they have myelin. And myelin is the coating. And they found out with repetition, you get thicker and thicker myelin. So the coating gets better and thicker, and you could do it over and over and over.
It's like making a track. Basically.
You're making a track. You're literally making a track. And we know that physiologically, that you're making more of a track, more of a mile. Now, if you're doing it the wrong way, you're going to make the wrong track.
Which goes back to like the story I told you about the old teacher, Tom Ness, who told the guy, when you go practice, you're just getting better at not being any good, right?
Right.
This guy
exactly.
just went full speed, and he didn't slow down, and he didn't try to make a change, right?
Exactly.
Going at full speed.
So that's why when I deliberately practice, but I also try to get the feedback, because I do like to practice, but I don't want to put in bad errors.
Okay. So one of the things we chatted about on the range, and this was happenstance. Some of it was just because, you know, sometimes you figure things out of necessity for something else, right? Like, so we would have these groups of good young players, and we had to see them all and get them through, and we'd put them in groups, but they would come in and they'd only just based on the people we had and the time, like they would go get 20 to 30 minutes in the bay. And then they would go do the chipping and putting, and then they'd go do, they go do some something else, and then they'd come back to us. And I was always stressed and worried that the player wasn't getting enough, right? Like that was me, because I'm used to 1 hour lessons or 2 hours. And I had a good player who's now pro, Will McFadden.
Yeah.
And Will said to me at the end of the weekend, he said, "That's the best one of these has ever been, and it's the most I've gotten out of it." I was feeling stressed, like I was feeling like people didn't get enough. And I said, "Well, why?" And he said, "Because I got to go in there and I got my info and I got a little bit of, feedback. And then I got to go do something else and kind of think and process it and do other stuff. And then when I came back, I was a little further along, and we got to analyze, had I processed it right or done it right, versus leaving at the end of 2 hours."
Right.
So is that a better way to
That's
learn?
absolutely a better way for two reasons. One, that's the way your brain works. And two, you may think you're doing it right because you're just doing it over and over, but you really haven't implemented it. Where when you walk away and you try to do it, your body and your mind will implement it for a longer period of time. It will stick. And it's almost like, again, what I know is medicine. If I need to give you medicine, I don't give you it all in one day. You take one pill a day for 7 days. It's effective. Even though I could give you 7 pills in one day, it's not effective. You can only take so much medicine in one day. And that's the same thing. The brain needs a chance to rest. Just like we talked about when you study, if you were to study for 6 hours and then sleep for 6 hours, or sleep first for 6 hours, wake up early and cram for 6 hours and take the test, the person who slept on it for 6 hours would do better than the person who crammed 6 hours just prior to the test. And one would think, well, it was fresh in his mind, but no. No, you have to let the way the brain works, it has to absorb it. And basically, you have to give those cells a chance to develop that cognitive tissue.
So I love this. Oh, there you go. That's
Can I
cool. Yeah,
shoot one?
100%.
So, what happens when you've got a player in front of you? If you're talking about body stuff, but they relate everything to hand.
Yes.
What's the difference between that?
One is feel as opposed to, what do you mean the hand?
So, the first time I got fired by a really good player,
Okay.
we were always doing pivot stuff because
It'll happen again.
he would shift his pelvis off of it. His chest was over here, and he would slide back under
Right.
it, right? So he'd get under and hit blocks and hooks.
Right.
And we always worked on pivot stuff, so I was trying to correlate feels like that.
Right.
And it would look better face on video, but he would always tell me what he felt with his hands.
I see.
And I was always trying to hammer him on his body stuff.
Well, that's the whole thing. He was doing the end result, and Tony actually did. I'm a more handsy guy, and he made me concentrate more on my body, and
So
my
you're telling
hands
me it was
just
him,
react.
not me.
It was him. And what happens is your hands will control your body. So what I was trying to do was do everything with my hands, and my hands were leading my body, and was setting my body out of swaying, whatever. But then it's sort of the dog wagging the tail. The body
Right.
is dictating to the hands. So he would put the cart before the horse. But you're going to feel with your hands, because here's again, and I don't want to get technical.
Yeah, no, you can get
There's different receptors. There's receptors, the most sensitive receptors, meaning touch, feel, pain, are in your fingertips, and like in your lips and in your tongue. That's where the most sensitive area is. So if I took a pin and you could tell me exactly where it is on your finger, I say, open your eyes, and you're exactly right. Now I take that pin and I put it on your back. You're like, oh, it's near my shoulder blade. The receptors aren't as much. Sort of like a TV doesn't have as many of the dots for HD TV. Instead, so your back only has 1,000, whereas your fingertip has 1,000,000. So people are going to have so much sensation in their hands that they're going to try to dictate their body what to do. Because when you do it with your body and you're turning your axial body, you're not feeling that feedback like you are in your hands. And I had to break that, and I had to trust it. So my body was wagging my tail. So it was, and I was getting my hands out of it, and my hands were just naturally going into.
Because I feel like 5 or 10% of my lessons, I typically try to get the club to respond from the body, right? Like
Yes.
you're saying.
Yeah.
But 5%, 10% of people, you do it with the club and their body responds better. And it's always funny to me when I figure out which one it is for that
Right.
person. Does that make
Well,
sense?
it does make sense. And I have another friend who keeps telling me he's a hands player, and every time he tries to change it, and I think it's because he practices with his hands all the time, and he makes his swing adjust to where his hands are,
Right.
and his body adjusts to where his hands are,
that.
and reacts to that. But really, it's the body. But the thing about the body is, again, you don't have as many receptors in your body because you have to operate with your hands.
Sure.
You don't operate with your chest.
Yeah.
But once you get that the thing is, the body's your core. So you're going to get your strength, and you're going to get your stability, and then everything else is going to fall into plane.
And so one of the things I've learned in trying to train people is that it is using resistance, where like if you pull them into their flaw, like if you're sliding and I've got a band that's pulling you into sliding and you have to resist it and do the other, people tend to learn that quicker.
It's reactionary. Yes. Yes. People will learn with reactionary.
But if I've put something there, like just up against their hip, like when you take it away, they haven't really learned.
No, because that's static.
Okay.
So you're doing action reactionary, and that's how the body and the brain works, whereas the other one's just static. So
Okay.
they're not learning on that. They're just, so you're really not dictating what they do when you just put something against them, but when they have to react, you are dictating.
Fascinating. Yeah.
What about the difference between somebody that's young, middle-aged, and older?
That's great. Okay. And I've noticed this just empirically looking. Like, I've been practicing and playing for years, and I get a little bit better each year. Then I had my son who just went through the roof really quickly. And I see some of these kids at the country club, they start off as little little ugly ducklings, and they go to swans. And I'm like, how many years? It's the plasticity of the brain. The saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is not totally true. It just takes longer. So a puppy is going to learn much quicker than an older dog. So a younger person is going to learn quicker than a 20-year-old, and a 40-year-old is going to learn slower than the two before. That's just the way it is. It's just natural, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. So it will happen. It's just a slower pace.
So what about differences in teaching juniors versus somebody that's in there? Do the same drills work, or do the same?
You know what I've noticed, and I sort of fascinated, because I'll play at a club where there's a lot of good players that started young and played in college and everything. And I remember once playing with this guy, and he had such a gorgeous swing, and his game, he shot in the low 80s, but nothing great. And I said, wow, your swing is so much better. He goes, well, I'm busy. I had kids. I played I was captain of my high school team. I played 1 year in college. I go, when did you start? He goes, well, I started when I was 6. And it's like, and I've noticed the ones that have the most graceful swings are the ones who start really early, that have those natural graceful swings. And every time I see someone, I could always say, you started early. You started.
I think that people that become good players often, they pick it up later in life, but then become good players, often have swings that aren't what you would call technically, but
right.
They're very functional. They figured out how to make things functional.
You're exactly right.
They oftentimes go out and they just start playing, right? And they're trying to figure it out while they play,
right?
Versus, so I think it becomes more functional versus having. I don't know if that's right or not.
Well, that's what I've noticed, is that the other, like my son again, and I only do it as a reference, has a really, really nice swing, and I always ask him, he can't. He just I just do it.
Yeah,
I just do it. And he knows little stuff, but he doesn't know anything close to what you do. And he doesn't teach me, and I don't ask him to teach me.
Now, so with the drills, like using those bands we've done, or the knee band, is that equally as effective with somebody that's 65 as it is with somebody that's 17?
I think it's probably more effective with the older people. I think the older you are, you have to do something more physical, more reactionary, and that the younger kids have that more plasticity and they could learn quicker and they don't need it as much or as long. Put it this way, the older person has to do it more often. So you could tell the young kid do it once a week, where the older guy, you say, do it 10 minutes every day.
Right. Well, to me, younger people, like especially young kids developing, to me, you have a lot, they're able to be more visual and watch things and go do it.
Yes.
Versus an older person slowing them down and making them have to do it.
Yes.
Is more effective.
So yes, the older person needs to do the exercises or the drills in a slower pace than the younger person. Both would benefit from it, but it has to be, we'll use the term, more deliberate. The older you are, the more deliberate. The more deliberate.
Now, why is that? Is it because there's more shit up there?
There's just more scar tissue and everything. There's more neurons. It's just like, you know, you can remember everything when you're a young kid, and then when you get older, you don't remember anything. You can't, you know, like you see him, oh, but I can't remember his name. Well, it's just like a computer. There's so much data in there. Doesn't mean, has nothing to do with your intellectual ability. It has everything to do, there's just more interference.
Mm-hmm.
There's more interference. So we use the term in neurosurgery, there's more plasticity. It's a cleaner brain. Doesn't mean.
Is there a difference from male to female when in training?
No.
Really?
There's a difference in brain size, but it doesn't mean anything. They've done intellectual studies and exactly the same, but a man's brain is 14 pounds, a woman's brain is 12 pounds, and has no effect on anything. And same thing with no difference.
Yeah. I didn't know my brain was bigger than Yvonne's. I'm going to use that later.
But again, there's just there's no difference.
So slow is
the older you are, the slower you should do it.
But for anybody, is slow. So slower rehearsals and practices before you hit.
Just before you hit are better, right? Right.
Now, what about?
Do you ever see some of the pros? I was watching the British Open or the Open.
Yeah.
And I was watching Justin Rose, and he was doing a slow, deliberate move, and then he got up there and went. His practice swing was a slow, brought it back, went down, and went through. And there's several players that do that. And that's a great way to practice, is do the one move slow, and then right after go do the other move.
How effective is slow moves in a mirror when you're not hitting? Does that help you learn the move?
It helps you. It helps you learn, but it'd be better if you could do it in the mirror and then put a ball down, like maybe a styrofoam ball inside.
Really?
Yeah.
So as long as you're hitting,
you have a target.
Full speed.
You have a target. That's all you have to do. So
why is the target important?
Target here,
focus.
target out there.
The target, like say if you're inside and it's winter and you have a mirror, and you do a slow move, and now you want to do the quick move. You could do the quick move, and that's fine, but you could do the quick move and you have a little styrofoam ball and you do the quick move through that.
Good. You got any more questions?
I have 1,000.
Ask you a couple. We got a couple more.
You go. I'm trying to sort it through.
Ask one. Come on.
So, what about training on the golf course? Because there's a massive difference.
Yes. I think, yes, absolutely. The closer you can get to what you want to accomplish, the best. Yes. So if we all lived in a perfect world and we could go and practice and take lessons on a course, that would be definitely more beneficial than a range. In fact, going back to what Tony said, if you did your 20 minutes of swing here and then your 20 minutes of putting, and then you went on a course, and that would be good. In fact, Tiger Woods, and if I had more time in my life, I read about stuff like, he would say his best day was go in the morning and practice, then go play 9 holes. And I found out myself the best thing, if I had time to go, and sometimes at my club, I'll go practice, and I'll just like I did last night, and I'll go jump and play 4 holes. And it makes a difference. It makes, and I was by myself, so I was very deliberate in everything I did, thought about everything I did, and sometimes even dropped the second ball.
Yeah.
Okay, what about kids playing other sports when they're growing up?
Best thing in the world.
Okay.
Best thing in the world. And again, and I'm only doing it as a reference, my son started off in baseball and hockey, really started off in hockey because I'm from the Northeast at the age 3.5, and then baseball. And the only reason why he picked up golf is because he would follow me to the course, and he had a nice swing, and he just picked it up, and he played different and continued to play all the way through high school. And then he got so good at golf, and he only grew to be 5'8". He said, "Dad, I'm a catcher. I'm 5'8". I'm not going to play in college." He goes, "But I could do that in golf, and I'd love it." And that's what he did. But I think multiple sports, and it goes back to developing those different neurons in your brain,
But,
the cerebellum and everything.
but good movement patterns, correct?
Good movement patterns. Anything with a stick and a ball, or soccer. You ever notice some of the best
Yeah.
football players were soccer players and basketball players? Anything with a ball, anything hand-eye coordination, anything. Tennis, baseball, stick in the ball, hockey. And I think hockey is great because in hockey, you have to stabilize that lower body.
Right.
And you got to actually treat it as two axes, upper axis being the chest and shoulders, lower being the pelvis. And you have to have balance. In fact, the only way I learned how to hit out of the sand was I thought I was on skates when I was in the sand. And then I could hit the ball out of the sand. They're like, "How do you hit the ball out of the sand?" And I go, "I just think about balance." And I always think I'm on skates and I'm hitting a puck.
We filmed this a month ago, and it's going to come out in a few weeks, but a piece where I learned to tarpon fish. And then I taught the guy who taught me to tarpon fish how to golf, and he hadn't played golf in 12, 13 years, right? And it was interesting because as we were going through it, and I'm going through the thing, I'm trying to teach him, and then we said, like, when you cast, what do you do? And he's like, "Well, I wind like this, and then I throw," right?
Right.
Like he throws it out there. I wouldn't stand there and go like that. And once he made the connection that it was the same basic movement, he was able to hit it really. I mean, this guy hadn't hit the ball in 12 years, and he was ripping some 8, 7 irons. But I think it's interesting how if you can help a person equate the movement to something they're already good at,
Absolutely.
right? That they already know. And then once they know it's okay for it to be like that feel, they pick it up pretty quick.
Well, it's funny. Today you were telling me about the drill with my lower body and winding up with my chest, and then the punch. And I didn't tell you, but I boxed a little when I was in the Boy Scouts. Nothing that I would ever tell anybody about. But I knew how to throw a punch.
But that's why
I knew how to throw. No. But my whole point is nothing that I would ever talk about. But as soon as you said that, I knew that how you don't punch with your arm, you punch with your chest and your lower body. That's one of the first things you learn. So when you did that, you noticed I picked it up right away. That was very relatable to me.
Right. And does that help people learn too? If you help them
relate
to a
yes.
movement they already know.
And again, back to if you play different sports. And there is also, I hate to say it, there is also a certain amount of coordination.
Correct.
The better athletes are going to pick it up.
Well, that's why, like, to me, these kids that play a lot of other sports, and then you get some kids that are good athletes that pick it up beginning of high school, and maybe they don't get good enough to go play major college golf because they only play competitively. But they normally can hit it really hard, and then a lot of them turn into be great players through continuing to play in college, right?
Yeah.
One more question.
Two. So what about we're watching golf and it's terrible weather outside? What happens when your environment out there changes?
Well, what happens is that's more of a physiological thing. Your joints, your muscles are going to contract. They're going to get tight. Your joints aren't going to be as flexible. So golf has a lot of flexibility to it. In fact, as I get older, I spend less time practicing before a round, and I spent 45 minutes stretching, and it makes all the difference in the world. So when it's cold out, you're going to have contraction of your muscles. You're going to have tightening of the joints in your sockets and everything. You're not going to have the flexibility, so it's going to be just that much harder.
But then is that a different movement pattern? And then people that grew up in that weather have those?
Yes, they know how to adjust to it. They know how to adjust it.
Okay.
Like Watson always played in lousy weather.
Right.
and he just knew exactly.
Okay. And what about creating speed for juniors? Like I've got a handful of kids that are tiny, and they.
The only thing, and I've read about this a lot, and the thing is, just tell them when they're young, hit it as hard as you can, as fast as you can, as hard as you can, as long as you stay in balance. As long as you stay in balance. They could swing hard, but if a guy,
as long as you can stay in balance.
if you can stay in balance. So if you have one kid who's just swinging it, and he's falling all over the place, you have to stay in balance.
That's what I told that kid.
Because if you don't stay in balance, that's where you're going to not only get bad habits, you're going to get injured. But you got to stay balanced.
Stay balanced.
Stay balanced.
Awesome stuff, Doc. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh,
thank you.
One last question.
Sure.
Some people can just swing it faster than others,
Yes.
right? Like there's some people that
Yes.
just have the ability.
Oh, well, that's again. I looked into this. It's muscle twitch, fast and slow muscles. It's sprinters. So they have shown that's where swinging fast actually. One of the way you can recruit those fast twitch muscles is with strength exercising. That's a known fact that if you do strength exercising, that you can incorporate those fast twitch muscles.
Really?
Yes.
Doc, this has been fun.
Yes.
Thanks so much for taking the time. And also just thanks for coming and taking
Sure.
the lessons. I have a blast. I learn more than you do when you come hang out.
Oh, back to those fast twitch. I'm sorry, but I looked at sprinters. What do they do with the sprint? They do box jumping because they explode those fast twitch muscles. And then they did physiological tests, and they showed that they had more recruitment with lifting. So
if we teach you to hit it further, as long as you can stay in balance,
swing fast, stay in balance, and then when you're not, do a certain amount of weightlifting to help incorporate those
be
fast.
strong enough to do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Doc, you're the best.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Did you ever hear that story about the